The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us for the 2018 Client Produce Survey webinar. My name is Lisa Boyd, and I'm an Agency Relations Account Specialist at Second Harvest. Today, we will have Ruti Dotto, Agency Relations Account Specialist, who will be leading the webinar. Before I turn it over to Ruti, I just want to cover some housekeeping details. We have saved time throughout the webinar to answer any questions you might have. And if you have questions as we go along, you can also feel free to enter them in the question box. This is located in the control panel, and that's the box to the right of your screen. All of your lines are muted, so you don't need to worry about any background noise. If you'd like your line to be unmuted, you can raise your hand. You should be seeing a hand icon on the little bar on the left of the control panel on the right. I will see that when you raise your hand, and at that point I'll be able to unmute you and we'll let you know when you'll be able to talk. This webinar will also be recorded and accessible on Agency Zone within the next 2 weeks, and watch for a follow-up email with a direct link to that recorded webinar. And now I will turn it over to Ruti.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you everyone for joining in on the webinar. We're really excited to have presenters here today to talk about the Client Produce Survey that was taking place last summer. Our presenters today include Teresa McCormick, who is Second Harvest's Produce Strategy Manager, and along with Teresa, we have Liz and Patrick from Interfaith Outreach Community, and we have Liz, who is the Community Engagement Director, and Patrick, who is the Food Shelf Manager. As far as the agenda, today we'll be covering why produce has become a focus for the network, and then Teresa will also be giving an overview of the Client Produce Survey conducted with General Mills. She will also be sharing the survey action items for Second Harvest to best serve agency partners and respond to the need of the community. After Teresa, we'll have Liz and Patrick present on how they have applied the survey results to interfaith outreach. And then along with the presentation, we will conduct produce polls to hear from you and also have space for questions at the end. And without further ado, I will turn it over to Teresa.
Good morning, everybody. Like Ruti said, my name is Teresa McCormick, and I am the Produce Strategy Manager here at Second Harvest Heartland. And a little bit about my background. I've been with our Produce Strategy team now for coming up on a year and a half, almost 2 years. And just to back up, our Produce Strategy team is fairly new for our organization, and we are really focused on the strategy development and barrier reduction so that we can, as an entire network, do more with the surplus fresh produce that we know is available. And so it really has driven this focus here at our organization, a focus on fresh. We recognize that produce plays a very key role in our neighbors' health outcomes, in their economic well-being, right? And so this has really driven a focus here at Second Harvest Heartland on how do we increase access for our neighbors to these fresh items, and how do we increase variety. So as we're starting to develop these strategies, there really became this kind of key underlying imperative for us to say we need to have a better understanding of our neighbors' preferences for produce and their barriers for produce. And so that led us down the path of saying we needed to really invest in getting this feedback from our neighbors so that we could understand what it was that was really helping them make choices when they are with you and how they access produce. So Lisa, you can go ahead and advance the slide. So as we were saying that we needed to answer that question, we looked essentially to our network as well as to some resources here with General Mills. an incredible team at General Mills called the Good Works team, and it's essentially a skilled volunteer kind of organization within General Mills. And we approached them and essentially said this key challenge for us is understanding our neighbors' preferences and our neighbors' barriers and how they're accessing produce. And in partnership with the General Mills Good Works team, we were able to design a client survey, and that was really going to help us answer these key questions. None of that would have been possible, this client survey, without the support of a number of our partners here. They're listed on the screen for you, and I just want to take a moment to thank everybody who participated in this, because as we were trying to answer that question for ourselves here at Second Harvest Heartland to say, what's our role in providing access and variety to our neighbors? This group of partners all saw the value in answering that question as well, and all saw the value, right, in saying we needed to be able to look more broadly, not just at individual partners' communities, but more broadly at the whole entire Second Harvest Heartland service area to be able to really understand some of the factors that influence how our neighbors are accessing produce. And so, they raised their hands and said, we'd like to be a part of this. And again, because they really saw the value in digging into this question. All right, Lisa, you can thank you. So again, our purpose was just to get a deeper understanding of preferences and personal barriers, right? We know, and we certainly have a lot of great discussion around some of the other barriers to access produce that are often supply chain driven, but we wanted to understand at the client level when people are making those decisions, really what their preferences were. So we were very thoughtful with General Mills and this Good Works team about how to design a survey that was going to answer these questions for us. In addition to the partners who raised their hands to participate, we also had 7 partners who were an advisory committee that really engaged on a very deep level in the survey design process, which was facilitated by General Mills Good Works. What was really exciting with partnering with the General Mills Good Works team is that we had industry experts from areas like consumer insights, right, and marketing, people who are very accustomed to working with this type of question of how do we get the survey data that really informs these decisions. And it was really a cool partnership to see come together with this advisory committee, because we were really able to design a survey in a way that was going to be very rigorous and representative of our service area, very thoughtful about how do we make sure that we're getting the right percentage of, say, partners, neighbors in urban versus rural versus suburban areas, so that it was truly a representative sample size of the Second Harvest Heartland service area. We also had an opportunity with George Washington University, a student there who was going to partner with us through the survey design and also do some additional analysis for us. So it was a really cool chance to see, right, what is our industry expert saying coming out of consumer insights, and then taking that academic lens and doing some survey analysis as well. And it really drove some key insights for us from this initiative. So cool collaboration across multiple different sectors, and I think was really important piece was this partner advisory committee to be very thoughtful with what questions are we asking, how are we asking them, what are some of our key assumptions that we need to really be probing into, and gave us this important insight into designing the survey. So after the survey was designed, we did work with then the partners to survey clients essentially on site, whether that was at produce distributions, whether that was at normal food shelf hours or food pantry hours, other kind of distribution efforts. And we were able to get more than 1,300 survey respondents from this effort. So incredible response to the survey, and it gave us a very statistically valid sample size to be able to say, all right, this is the volume of data that we needed to have to be able to draw these conclusions. Lisa, you can go ahead and advance. So there were a couple of key takeaways for us as we were going through all of the data. One of the things that really stood out very loud and clear in our findings was that families really do rely on our food shelves for the majority of their produce needs. More than 60% of our survey respondents across all demographic groups, right, across all different sizes of partners and different community service areas, more than 60% of our survey respondents were getting half or more of their produce needs from their food shelf partner. That was an important piece for us. And it really, I think it really underscored what we anecdotally knew to be true and underscored and quantified just how important it is for us to be thinking about our partners' barriers and our neighbors' barriers and our neighbors' preferences, because it does represent such a significant portion of their nutritious food access, right? And then also how they are making choices to really stretch their dollars. So as we were digging into the data, there were really 3 top barriers that stood out for us: accessibility, freshness, and variety. So when we talk about accessibility, there's a frequency piece in here. 84% of our survey respondents, again, across all demographic groups, wish that they could get produce more often, which I thought was a really compelling piece, because so many the majority of our respondents were saying that they were getting half or more of their produce needs from their food shelf. 84% said they wish that they could come more frequently. We're also looking at accessibility in terms of how people were getting to their food shelf. 20% of our folks who responded were taking public transportation or walking, and we thought that that was a really important measure for us to pay attention to. But I will be totally honest and candid. I personally was expecting to see that a little bit shake out a little bit differently, and so we were really interested to see that of the folks who are engaging, that there were a high percentage who had other means of transportation, and therefore transportation to be able to bring things back home, whether that was they were driving their own car or someone was driving them, or there was other kind of ride service situation. So that was really an interesting fact for us, right? That people want to come back more often, and in many cases have the ability to bring, if they're already accessing produce, have the ability to bring that produce home with them in a larger volume. We also really saw loud and clear that freshness was a top barrier for our neighbors. So when I talk about freshness, we're talking about essentially 2 things, right? A state as well as condition. So 85% of our respondents said that they preferred fresh produce as a state over other states of produce, like frozen or canned. And so that was very interesting to see come through. There were certainly respondents who were talking about canned or frozen produce for convenience or for the sake of ease in preparation or storage, but it really rang clear through the data that that fresh state of produce is highly desirable and is something that people are essentially looking for from us. However, the lack of freshness in terms of the quality or condition was the top reason for not taking more produce, which was fascinating to all of us, right? That's how it looked and how much, shelf life, if you will, use kind of the jargony term, was left with the produce. That was really a key in making that decision of, am I going to take more or not? So we've got folks saying, I want to come more often. I get the majority of my produce from my food shelf, but lack of freshness is a reason why I'm not taking more. And that's a key barrier. The other piece that was very compelling and came out in our data was that 70% of our respondents wish that there were more choices offered, which was really interesting for us, because the other kind of piece of it is that across all of our demographics, whether it was age, whether it was, the urban, rural, suburban, other kind of demographic factors, there really were some top preferences in terms of items people wanted to see from their food shelf, or they wanted to be able to access from their food shelf. There really were some top items that kind of stood out across all of the demographic groups, but our respondents still want the ability to have choice and variety. All things that, again, we anecdotally knew to be true. And I'm sure there's a lot of folks nodding their head as they're listening to this, but it was important for us to quantify this, and it was important for us to be able to extrapolate across our entire service area because, again, as a produce strategy team, this really drives how we make some of the decisions around produce here at Second Harvest Heartland, and we can get into that. Lisa, you can go ahead and advance the slide. So how do we apply that here at Second Harvest Heartland? For us, there's kind of two big initiatives that we're doing some just immediate application around. First is increasing accessibility, and the other is increasing freshness, right? So when we talk about increasing accessibility, essentially it's how do we create more consistency in the produce offerings that we have for our entire network, for you as partners. We know, right, being in the upper Midwest, there is a strong seasonal component to when there is agricultural surplus. So how do we make sure that we can expand our produce offerings so there's not this ebb and flow throughout the year, but there's more varieties and more produce available consistently throughout the year? So one example of that is the expansion of the case counted subscription program this year. This last winter, we were able to move this into a year-round program, so there's not that peak and ebb and flow between when produce is available. We're seeing, right, that our neighbors are telling us, I want more produce. I want to come more frequently. This is important to me. I want the fresh produce. So for us, the key imperative is how do we create stability so that there's more produce year-round, more variety offered year-round. And I know that Ruti will be getting into the expansion of the case counted subscription program in a little bit. There's other efforts that we are looking to expand. That it really is, again, how do we create consistency in the produce supply chain and consistency and year-round access. So some other types of efforts like other distributions that we've been doing, say the hub and spoke that's been going on with our partnership with Penske in the Mankato area. But again, it's efforts that are looking at creating consistency in the produce supply. And then the other area that we're developing strategies around is how do we increase the freshness in terms of the condition, the freshness of the produce. So with things like how do we do more with quality assurance procedures, right? How do we do more with better culling? How do we improve our produce supply chain so it's getting to you as a partner faster and fresher? So these are all efforts that we're digging into here at Second Harvest Heartland that's really been driven by a better understanding of our clients or of our neighbors' needs and of their preferences. Lisa, you can advance it. So I referenced that, pardon me, our respondents were telling us that they'd like to see more variety. And at the same time, there were some key things that really raised bubble to the top. And so Ruti asked me to be able to share a little bit about these top items, these fruits and veggie mix items that folks were really saying what they were looking for. So for those who did participate in the survey, you'll remember there was essentially a check the box kind of question where folks had the opportunity to select their top 10 items that they were interested in. And what was certainly really exciting for us to see, right, is that it's really aligned with the top grocery store movers, right? Because everyone's consumers. We have the same kind of preferences and interests across our demographic groups, and that was fascinating. So that's not to say that anything that's in blue on the right that we wouldn't want to see those varieties come through. Obviously, there's respondents who are still interested in those items, but when you look at those top items, we really say, okay, if we're going to say we need some consistency in our produce supply chain and we want to really have year-round access, are there other strategies that we can develop to make sure that we've got consistency in the items that are most appealing to folks so that they know that they're going to be able to find X, Y, and Z item at their food shelf? So again, more directional information for us, but as we think about how we develop the strategies, it's how do we make sure that we're investing in the items that people want to see, that they want for their families, that they want to bring home and put on the dinner table. And so this is really just an important piece of information for us to be able to say, where do we invest? And apples is something that is just highly, highly, highly desired by everybody across every demographic group. So, for example, how do we find some consistency, not just in our overall supply chain, but consistency in the items that people want to see? Lisa, you can advance it. All right, so we can certainly take a moment for questions, but for us, I think the big important pieces of our findings was really understanding how much folks were accessing produce from you all as the food shelf, that they're really relying on this produce access for a significant portion of their produce needs for their families. And it gave us incredible insight into how important it is for us to really invest in the freshness and stability of the produce supply chain.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Teresa. So at this time, if you have any questions about the overview of the Client Produce Survey, any questions for Teresa, please take a moment to type those questions in on the right-hand side of your screen, or you can hit on the raise hand feature. And I'll give us a couple seconds here to type out those questions and have Lisa read the questions for Teresa.
Teresa, we already have a question from Winnie. She says, I'm surprised not to see peppers anywhere on the list of desired produce. We get a lot of requests for peppers. Were they an item that people could select?
That's a fabulous question. I'll have to go back and look at the item again, the item list, the top sheet again. What we did for developing our top item list was we looked at what has been distributed. And we also looked at top grocery store movers. So I'll have to go back and confirm that. That's a great question, because it's also something that we do see a fair amount of in our area as well, right? Locally, when there's local harvest season, there's certainly an abundance of peppers. So let me follow up on that one. Ruti, can I get you that info and follow up?
Absolutely. Thank you.
And I'll just mention that all the questions that get typed here will be saved to a file, and so we'll have a record of all the questions that came up, and if we don't get to your answer today, we can certainly get to it later.
All right, if there are not any more questions, we will head over to the next portion of the presentation, where we will hear directly from our agency partner, Interfaith Outreach. And so Liz, who is the Community Engagement Director, and Patrick, who is the Food Shelf Manager, will present their findings from the survey and any advice they may have for partners who are looking to do the survey themselves and implement it at their programs. So I will hand it over to Liz and Patrick.
Great, thank you, Ruti. And again, my name is Liz. I work in the Community Engagement Department at Interfaith Outreach, which helps support and manage our food shelf. And just to give listeners a little background on our organization, we're a multi-service agency, so we have a food shelf, but many other programs and service areas. And we serve families, kids, and seniors in Western Hennepin County in a suburban community. And our mission is to engage the heart and will of our community to respond to emergency needs like food and hunger, and create opportunities for all in our community to thrive. In terms of scope, last year we served over 2,000 households, which was around 6,000 individuals. Nearly half of them were kids, so we have a lot of kids running around our building and accessing our food shelf. However, half of our households are those that are adult only and do not include kids, and we know that they have some unique needs and preferences in our food shelf as well. Another thing to note about our community is that it's growing in diversity. 61% of our clients are people of color, 26% of our clients identify as an immigrant, refugee, or asylee, coming from over 50 different countries, but the most common being Somalia, Russia, and Mexico. The last thing I'll note that I think impacts some of the results that we saw is that here in the western suburbs, with the increase of suburban poverty and the current housing crisis we're in, we've seen an increase in families experiencing homelessness. And so last year, nearly a quarter of our households served by Interfaith and served by our food shelf were experiencing homelessness, which we know impacts things like accessibility and how often people might need to visit our food shelf, and challenges with things like fresh produce that they can't store over time. So just a little insight about our organization, and I'll hand it over to Patrick.
Yeah, hi, Patrick here. I'm the food shelf manager over here at Interfaith Outreach. And so when we first got these results, we kind of immediately started putting things into practice because we had the information. And the biggest one, which is the informing decisions on things we order. For our food shelf, we rely a lot on retail partner pickup. So a lot of things we get are donated, and we don't have enormous control over that. But just since what we order, it's things we're spending money on, and so we have pretty much all the control over it. And so we just use this to inform, like especially the huge preference for fresh food, getting more of that versus canned and frozen. And also using the top 20 and bottom 20 lists, just in case if there's a scenario where we could either order between like onions or, I'm looking for what's unpopular, radishes, like go with onions just because that's a bigger preference. And also informed how we interact with the community, in that what we do, a lot of times people will reach out and ask what they should donate, and we will always reference people back to this list. I've even shared it with some people saying, hey, here's our clients polled, here's what they prefer, here's what they don't prefer. So we're getting community donations, people are kind of giving us what we need. And also we've been able to use it to show people that the people use, the families that use our services desire healthy food, quality food, just like anyone would. So it kind of helps bridge the gap between the families using our services and the families like helping us with our services. And it also shows the community how we use client voice to sort of guide our decisions. Obviously, pretty much the food shelf is just run on what the people we are serving need and want. And so that's a good thing. We kind of have a physical version of that we can show the community so they can kind of understand that process, that word I'm forgetting.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think we can go next slide.
And about stay tuned.
Oh yeah, sorry, last one is it's impacted how we stage things. For most shifts, we usually have more produce than we have space for produce. And so we've just used this to sort of, yeah, like I said before, if we have a lot of onions and a lot of rhubarb, put out more onions than rhubarb because that's a more preferred thing. Just what is the variety available to clients when they get here, we can sort of stage it according to these results. So people, the more popular things there's more of, and maybe the less popular things, they're still there, but we just don't fill a whole shelf with turnips or anything. Yeah, and for accessibility, what we found is we have a lot of food shelves are once a month. We are actually twice a month. It's once every other week, so that has helped in for accessibility that people can be here twice. And so for a lot of the produce we have can't sit in the fridge forever. So this has helped with that, so people only kind of have to plan for the week in between. And also for the increased accessibility in suburban communities, we have, I know people struggle with transportation since we are a suburb and it is a little more sprawling of an area. And there is one thing we have, that's already something kind of a work in progress we're always trying to improve on. But we do have a home delivery program, which has helped for people. Currently we have 40 households. We're looking to turn that to 80 next year. And just for people who are homebound and can't make it to our food shelf, just so we have some way that they can still benefit from our services. And this is given those people, just both these things, being open more than once a month and having the home delivery program just increases people's access to produce, dairy, meat, the things that aren't shelf stable and they would need to consume in a faster time, just so people have more opportunities to come get those. And for freshness, other thing I mentioned earlier, just ordering fresh items based on preferences, so using the top 20 list, using less money on frozen stuff and canned stuff, trying to get that fresh food as much as it's available and just fill our food shelf as much of it as possible. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, and again, with the berries, variety is a huge one, and so we just try just seeing how important it is to the people we serve. As Liz touched on, we serve a pretty diverse community, and that diverse community has a lot of different wants and needs. Just being able to meet any person that might come to us. Yeah, and I keep going back to the top 20 list, but that's really the number one used thing, just kind of going back to this top 20 list. There are things that kind of cross cultures. Apples pretty much are taken by everyone, so kind of have a lot of those things that cross groups. But then also have kind of those specific things, maybe something like eggplants and apricots that might not everyone wants, but they'd be bigger in some communities than with others. But make sure we kind of have those kind of niche things. Yeah. Yeah, and for our key takeaways, I think I was very surprised by the fact that 54% of people have some sort of chronic illness in their family. That's not something I was aware of, so that's been a big indicator of just how much people are going to rely on us for getting healthy food. Self-described health, many people living in poverty have poor health, and we want to be able to improve that. And we know something that I had heard last year, kind of as we were doing the survey, was that medicine only covers some of people's health. Most of it comes from healthy diets, exercise, stuff like that. And since we are a part of these people's diets, we just want to make it as healthy as possible. And also, this is very helpful, again, to share with donors, as it kind of creates just the amount of how much food impacts people's health, that we're able to help people overcome those challenges. It's that same thing. It's good for fundraising reasons. This is good information to share out. That one, that we're getting this information, and two, so people, the families we serve aren't just kind of a hypothetical family. People are sort of getting a snapshot of what our families actually want and need. And yeah, the difference in preference between dehydrated, canned, and fresh produce. As I touched on before, kind of focusing more on fresh seems to be what, I forgot the exact statistic, but I think it was over 90% of people prefer that who use our services. So obviously getting a focus on that just because that's what people are saying they want.
Good, and then I'll jump back in here to talk a bit about how we shared our survey results when they came back from General Mills and the Second Harvest team. So we thought, of course, it's really important that we share these back with our clients. We ask for their input, we value their input, so we think it's really important that they know as a whole what we learned from our client community. So we did that formally in our monthly e-news that goes to our client community. So anybody who signed up for those email updates, the first article or little section on the email, I think it was maybe in December or January, was all about what we learned about the survey, thanking people for their input and telling them that, like Patrick just mentioned, this data, this information is going to impact what we purchase, what we ask people to donate, how we display things and stage things in our food shelf, that we really appreciate their input, and it will impact how the food shelf is run and managed. So again, it was shared formally in the email. One thing that we haven't done yet, that this being a part of this webinar has helped us think about, is what about folks who maybe don't read the email, or maybe just have different ways of interacting with our organization? So we thought, we should get some sort of physical, could be simple, but some sort of big sign or poster that could display some of these survey results as well. So people know, again, we heard you, here's what you said, and here's how you might see it coming to life here in the food shelf in the year to come. So we do hope to do that in the months ahead to inform our clients. I will say we've also done a great job of sharing this informally with our volunteers. Volunteers in our food shelf really run and manage the place. And so it's really important that they hear what our clients need and want. Produce is much more difficult for our team to manage. Loading it in, culling through it all, it increases our trash. We don't have a lot of cooler space to display it. And so in general, sometimes our volunteers can get frustrated or, you know, even get to the point where they say, do we need all this fresh stuff, or boy, this is difficult. And so sharing these survey results are really helpful to remind our volunteers that our clients want healthy foods for their families. Like Patrick mentioned, many of our clients have health challenges and self-describe as poor health. And so having these quality fresh produce items are going to be really beneficial to our families. So again, sharing it with our volunteers. So what's next? We continue to think about how these results will impact how we run our food shelf. Patrick has done a great job already of using this data to impact how we source food, what we're using our limited food shelf budget to purchase. Also really trying to communicate this out to donors and faith communities and corporate groups that might be planting gardens this summer. Not all of the items that our clients want maybe could be grown here in Minnesota or grown well here in Minnesota, but many of them can. So how do we communicate that to our donor community so they can help support those needs and source those items? We also, in terms of the next step, we want to just recommit to our stance around client choice. So I know this survey focused a lot on healthy, good produce, and we love that. And we want to do our best to continue to offer a wide variety and good amount of produce. But in reviewing this input from our clients, we also know that choice is really important, choice and dignity for the families that we serve. So though we might consider how to display produce differently, where it's located in our food shelf, we're a food shelf that will still probably have cookies and still probably have, you know, some different kinds of foods that aren't just fresh produce and dairy and things like that. We really value choice, and we want to stick to that. And then lastly, we just know that all of this interest in produce, the growing opportunity for produce is great, but we've really got to start rethinking how our food shelf is physically constructed, because we're really not set up to maximize this new resource of produce and fresh goods in general. So we're hoping this fall to apply and hopefully get the Super Shelf Grant so we can get some help in thinking about how to display, how to merchandise, how to maybe increase our freezer and cooler space so that our clients can really get more access to this great healthy produce while maintaining that client choice model that we have. So that's our plan. Oh, and lastly from us, I will just share a quick note of advice. When we facilitated this survey, I think we had one of the highest percentages of respondents. We had 229 of our households respond to the survey, which was awesome. We were excited about that. And I think one strategy we use that might be helpful to others in the future is, in addition to the tablets that General Mills helps supply to facilitate the surveys electronically, we knew that a lot of our households and clients really appreciated having a printed paper copy that they could take on a clipboard and sit down and talk through either with someone else in their household or read at their leisure and take their time. Just in general, that's often how we've facilitated surveys in the past. And so in addition to the electronic survey that was on the tablet, we chose to have printed copies, again, in multiple languages, for clients to have the choice to sit down and take the survey on their own or bring it home and return it at a later time. And then we just took those paper copies and entered them electronically into that survey respondents. So I think that helped our food shelf. Of course, each community is different, and so take that as you will, but I would just share that as words of wisdom from a site that got a lot of respondents. Good.
Thank you.
Well, that's what we have. I don't know if
Yeah, thank you so much, Liz and Patrick from Interfaith Outreach again for sharing their insight from conducting the survey. And before I leave time to ask them questions, I'm going to go over Neighborhood House, who is another agency that participated in the client produce survey. They unfortunately were not able to join us today, but they did send over some great insight to share with you all. So I'm going to quickly go over that. And a lot of it is very similar to Interfaith Outreach, and I'm sure a lot of our partners of what they've already implemented because of the results of the survey. So, to respond to the top barriers of accessibility and freshness, Neighborhood House has implemented new services such as Bonus Thursdays and year-round fresh produce distributions. The Bonus Thursdays are a weekly food rescue drop where they have at the Wellstone Market, and this just allows families to access more produce. So this was, again, a response to the top barrier of accessibility. And they also provide the year-round fresh produce distributions at Metro State University between November through May to provide families another resource of produce in the winter season. And then to improve freshness, they have been ordering fresh produce from both the food group and then accessing produce drop pallets from Second Harvest in order to improve on the freshness of produce that they receive for clients. And as far as key takeaways, Song from Neighborhood House mentioned that it was helpful to see which items their participants preferred and to know that they were already providing that produce. And it was also disheartening to learn that 60% of participants were getting half or most of their produce from food markets or food shelves when the food market is only providing enough food to last the week. So that was a little disheartening. So as an action plan, what they're hoping to do is look at policy level involvement to address these bigger issues that revolve around hunger, every aspect of hunger, which areas in life lead to hunger, and how they're able to respond to that on a larger level. And as far as advice to agency partners who are looking to conduct the surveys at their programs, it was very similar to Liz and Patrick's advice of having either someone that speaks multiple languages or translating the surveys into languages that are represented among the participants. So in-house, they translated their surveys to Hmong and Karen to make sure that every family that could participate would be able to. And then they said to take in that it does take a large amount of time to translate the surveys. And this was one piece of insight that we are looking at here at Second Harvest Heartland on how we can make that either easier or work with partners to make sure that we can provide different translations for the survey so that multiple families can participate and everyone is being represented. So I know I fairly jumped through that quite quickly, but I wanted to give a chance for you all to ask questions for Liz and Patrick. So please take this time to either type the questions or hit on the raising hand feature on the right side of your screen. And I'll have Lisa read any questions or unmute anyone that wants to ask any questions for Liz, Patrick, or any to Teresa from the beginning.
So while folks are thinking of their questions for Liz and Patrick, we did get some more information about peppers. One participant did notice that peppers were actually listed at the bottom, I believe on the left side, the yellow side, as one of the most wanted items. And Teresa added, in case you're not able to see the chat area, peppers were included as a prompt in the client survey, but it wasn't broken down by specific colors of peppers, green, red, yellow, orange, and so forth. Were all grouped into one prompt and just classified as peppers. But peppers did rank in the top 20 as number 19 above melons. So there is a strong interest in bell peppers. Also, we did have a couple of other questions come in earlier. One, maybe for Teresa, do you have a breakdown of what areas the surveys came from? And I believe that's maybe a question about geographic areas. Janice, if you want to clarify that.
Lisa, I can chime in. This is Liz from Interfaith Outreach. When we got the survey results, there was a summary about respondents by geography, and it looked like 49% of the respondents came from suburban communities, 38% from urban communities, and 13% from rural communities. So there was quite a range from suburban, urban, and rural.
All right, thank you. And then another question that came in from Winnie. So fruits figure high on the list of desires, but we would like for health reasons to also promote lots of vegetables. How do you balance those issues?
Yeah. Could you repeat that one more time, please?
Fruits, so if we're looking at the preferences over there, fruits figure high on the list of desires, but this participant at their program, they would like for health reasons to also promote lots of vegetables as well as fruits. How do you balance those? In other words, people are saying that they really want lots of fruits, but the program is also trying to promote vegetables. So how do you promote vegetables when people are preferring fruits?
Well, for our food shelf, we actually have the fruit and vegetable limits are actually different. So when you come here, and instead of saying you get like 10 pieces of produce, you get 5 fruit and 5 vegetables. And so we'll kind of go through our stock and kind of promote both that way. And also for this list, at least when we use it for ordering, we've broken it into like 4 different areas. There's top 20 fruit, top 20 vegetable, then bottom 20 fruit and bottom 20 vegetable. Mm-hmm. And so I know like potatoes are kind of a little farther down this list, but it's still pretty high and maybe the number 1 vegetable. So we just kind of broke the data down a little more and just kind of used that to inform our decisions.
And then I would say our hope is to learn from industry experts, people who do this in grocery stores with their own product, as we apply for the super shelf. You know, how can we display things in a way that can encourage people to try some new vegetables, or learn how to prepare vegetables in a different way that might make you actually like them and not think they're disgusting. So using some tools from the industry to also display and encourage people to make some different kinds of choices.
Wonderful. So for the next portion of the presentation, if there are not any questions at this time, we'd like to take a few polls to hear directly from you. And so the first poll we will conduct will be, does your program currently access produce? So once Lisa launches the poll, we'd like to hear if you access produce and whether that's through case counted, produce drops, food rescue, non-second harvest sources like the food group. We just want to hear if you do, and then we'd like to ask what barriers you face in accessing produce, if any. So at this time, we'll start the poll for the first question of, does your program currently access produce? Wonderful. So at this time, we'll close the poll and we'll show the results. So it's fairly expected that 96% do access produce and 4% don't. So for those who do not access produce, or for those who access a limited amount of produce, what barriers have your programs faced in accessing this produce for your clients? So if you are able to either answer through the question box on the right hand side, or to again hit on the raise your hand feature to hear more about what barriers you face. And the reason we'd like to ask this is so that we can compile these answers and feedback to improve access to produce on our end and see what ways we can work with you to improve that. All right, it looks like we may have lost a few people here, but I'd like to have anyone has any answers of what barriers you currently face in accessing produce. So from the poll, it showed that about 4% are having limitations in accessing produce. So we'd like to hear from you directly on what are ways and barriers that you have faced, and how we can compile these answers and feedback to improve our access to produce for all of our agency partners. And then our final poll here will be to go and a second poll to kind of gauge the interest of this topic. And if you'd like to hear more about the client produce survey, this will be a time to hear about it at the fall agency conference. So the second poll that we will conduct here is, would this be a topic of interest for you for the fall agency conference? To extend the conversation, to learn more from partners, any interest at all. We will start that poll up here in a couple seconds to hear from you. And at this time, you can also answer in the right-hand box of what barriers you currently face, so that we can compile those answers to better serve you. Wonderful. So we did get great interest about having this at the fall conference. So thank you so much for answering these polls. And we will be sending out the presentation. I did see the question about the presentation being sent out, especially the top 20 and bottom 20 list. And we will be doing that. We'll send out a recording of the presentation as well as resources for the client produce survey. And if your programs are interested in conducting the survey, we'll have some information for you. So finally, I just wanted to talk about a few ways you can access produce through Second Harvest Heartland. And if you are interested in expanding produce options with your programs, please contact your account specialist. So the first one is the case counted subscription, which lasts now through year round. It's both seasonal and summer. So the winter one, the prices do vary throughout the season, but it's from 4 cents to 10 cents, and that depends on where it's sourced from, the type of produce, whatever that might be. And then a $40 delivery fee if it is sent on a different day. And so each of these cases that are sent out are about 30 to 40 pounds per case. Another option is produce drops. So these are palletized produce that can be delivered to your program as well. And then a third option is food rescue, which a lot of you may have already accessed, but this could either be agency pickups from retailers or food rescue direct drops. There's several ways that we can go about making sure that your program accesses food rescue. So again, if you are interested in any of the ways to expand produce at your programs, please again contact your account specialist. So finally, I'd like to take this time, if you have any additional questions for Teresa, Liz, Patrick, or I, just please either raise the right hand on the screen or type the question into the box. And again, we will be sending out a recording of the webinar along with key information about the client produce survey for those who are interested in implementing it at your programs. So I'll give you all a couple seconds here to ask any additional questions you may have. And if you do have questions that we aren't able to get to today, any questions, thoughts, or feedback, please again contact me or your account specialist, and we will make sure to compile the feedback for better improvement of our services.
So Ruti, I'm seeing that we got some great answers about the barriers. And again, we will be saving all of that feedback and using it to help improve the program. But we also had another question come in. Are clients thinking in terms of quality or shelf stability or other factors? Wondering if watermelons rank high not only because it's tasty, but because a single melon contains multiple servings, stretching the food to last longer. So that question could maybe go to Liz or Patrick. Did you get any indications from your clientele?
I don't know around serving size. When we asked clients, you know, what drives their produce choices, it was quality that ranked the highest, above nutrition, above taste, above convenience. I guess serving size was not one of the options, but quality ranked the highest. And I think that's because a good chunk of our fresh produce comes from our retail pickups. So you can imagine the quality is not at its peak. Sometimes it is on the tail end of its quality. So I think our clients were just reminding us that that's really important to them, and we need to keep working on culling through the produce that comes to the food shelf, sourcing a produce that might be a little earlier in its produce cycle, so it's not, so it can be enjoyed for days and maybe a week to come after visiting the food shelf.
For serving size, though, like I know it wasn't here officially, but anecdotally, yeah, I'd say that's obviously part of the choices people make, especially if someone's coming here with like a large family. You're going to get the thing that can feed your family. You're not going to get the thing that won't last as long. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, anecdotally, yes to that question.
Mm-hmm. I also think one of the things that we noticed is some of our top ranking produce choices from our client community are what I would consider really kid-friendly options, things like apples, bananas, strawberries. Again, half of our clientele are kids, 0 to age 17. So remembering that though we want a lot of variety, kid-friendly choices are also really important.
And from a survey design perspective, we did not ask questions about serving size, but we did ask questions basically about how long items last and if folks are making decisions about taking produce because of how long it will last at home. So we had questions about, I don't take produce because it doesn't last so long. I don't eat it all because it doesn't last. Questions about being able to store things. Questions even about being able to have access to, kitchen, refrigeration, utensils, things like that. So we were certainly probing into understanding how shelf life essentially does contribute to all of those decisions that people are making. And again, just to echo what was shared, right, it was quality, the freshness that came through really above all of those other decisions.
Then we have another question. The posters you were talking about with results to the clients, will those be sent to the food shelves?
Is that in reference to the posters we were talking about at Interfaith?
Yes.
I think that would be something we'd make in-house.
Mm-hmm.
So it'd be, it'd be based on your unique results. So it wouldn't be something sent out per se. It'd be something we would use personally for our client base.
If helpful, we'd be happy to take a photo and could share it with Second Harvest if others who take this survey in the future want to model after it.
Well, and I know one of the things that we try and do as agency relations staff at Second Harvest is collect templates and examples of methods that other partner agencies have used to share results back to their clientele.
Mm-hmm.
So follow-up question though, will each food shelf get our results? It's maybe a question for Teresa.
Yeah, so that was part of the participation, is that you should have received those results back. If you haven't, certainly I can coordinate with Rudy and Lisa to make sure that you get those, because we do have them, and we wanted to make sure that the folks who participated and really worked with their neighbors, that you have your information as well back. So follow up if you did not receive those, or if you just want a fresh copy, right, top of the inbox kind of deal, we can certainly get that for you.
All right. And so it doesn't look like there are any additional questions. So I just wanted to take this time to say thank you to all the participants today who were able to listen in and participate throughout the webinar. Thank you so much, and we truly value all of your questions, thoughts, and feedback. I'd also like to thank Teresa, Liz, and Patrick for presenting today and sharing some really key valuable insight for all of us regarding the client produce survey. And thank you, Lisa, for driving the presentation. So this is this is the end of our presentation today. And again, if you do have any additional questions or feedback that you'd like to share regarding the survey, please contact your account specialist. We will be sending the recording and other key information about the survey to you all within the next 2 weeks. And that is all I have for you today. So thank you all and have a wonderful day.